March 22nd, 1901, Volume 4. She Sees Rome and Great Sins. Jesus wants to chastise, but Luisa is opposed. As I continued in my usual state of privation and therefore of unspeakable bitternesses, this morning my adorable Jesus came and transported me outside of myself. It seemed to me that it was Rome. How many spectacles one could see from all classes of people. Even in the Vatican one could see things that were repugnant. What to say then about the enemies of the Church? How consumed with rage they are against her. How many slaughters they are plotting. But they cannot carry them out because our Lord holds them bound still. But that which frightened me the most was to see my loving Jesus almost in the act of giving them freedom. Who can say how consternated I remained? And then seeing my consternation, Jesus told me, "Daughter, the chastisements are absolutely necessary. Rot and gangrene have entered all classes. Therefore fire and sword are necessary so that not everyone may perish. So this is the last time I tell you to conform to my will, and I promise you to spare in part." And I, "My dear good, I don't have the heart to conform to you in chastising people." And he, "If you do not conform, since it is of absolute necessity to do this, I will not come as usual, and I will not manifest to you when I send the chastisements. And since you would not know it, and I would not find anyone who would somehow break my just indignation, I will give free vent to my fury, and you will not even have the good of sparing the chastisement in part. In addition to this not coming and not pouring in you those graces which I should pour, is also a bitterness for me, just like in these past days in which I have not come so much. I have the grace constrained within me." And while saying this, he showed that he wanted to unload himself, and drawing near my mouth, he poured a most sweet milk, and he disappeared. March 22nd, 1908, Volume 8. The state of Luisa is a state of continuous prayer, of sacrifice, and of union with God. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I seemed to see M. and other priests. Then a young man of divine beauty came, who drew near me and gave me some food, and I prayed him to share that food which he was giving me with M. and others. So, drawing near M., he gave him a good share of it, saying to him, "I share my food with you, and you satisfy my hunger by giving me souls," pointing to the work which M. wants to do, and also exciting him strongly in his interior by giving him impulses and inspirations. Then he shared it with others. In the meantime, a venerable lady came out, and those who had received food from the young man drew around her and asked her what my state was. And the lady answered, "The state of this soul is a state of continuous prayer, of sacrifice, and of union with God. And while being in this state, she is exposed to all the events of the Church, of the world, and of the justice of God, praying, repairing, disarming, and preventing, as much as she can, the chastisements which justice wants to unload upon creatures. So things are all suspended." Now while hearing this, I said to myself, "I am so bad, yet they say that this is my state?" But in spite of this, I found myself near a little window up high, and from it I could see all that was being done in the Church and in the world, and the scourges which were about to fall. But who could tell them all? I move on so as not to be too long. And oh, how I moaned and prayed. I would have wanted to tear myself to pieces in order to prevent all this. But all of a sudden everything disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. March 22nd, 1919, Volume 12. All things came out to life from the eternal Fiat. Excesses of love in the creation of man. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I could see all the order of created things. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, see what harmony, what order in all created things, and how all of them came out to life from the eternal Fiat. Everything cost me a Fiat, the most tiny star as well as the refulgent and splendid sun, the most tiny plant just as the great tree, the most tiny insect just as the largest animal. They all seem to say among themselves, 'We are noble creatures. Our origin is the eternal volition. We all carry the mark of the supreme Fiat. It is true that we are distinct and different from one another. We have diversity of office, of light, of heat. But this says nothing. One is our value, the Fiat of a God. One our life and preservation, the Fiat of the eternal majesty.' Oh, how eloquently does creation speak of the power of my will, teaching that from the greatest thing to the smallest, one is the value, because they have life from the divine volition. In fact, a star would say to the sun, 'It is true that you have much light and heat. Your office is great, your goods immense. The earth almost depends on you, so much so that I do nothing in comparison to you. But the Fiat of a God made you so. Therefore our values are equal. The glory which we give to our Creator is completely similar.' Then he added in a more afflicted tone, 'It was not so in creating man. It is true that his origin is my Fiat, but this was not enough for me. Taken by excess of love, I breathed on him, wanting to infuse in him my own life. I endowed him with reason. I made him free, and I constituted him king of the whole creation. But man, ungrateful, how did he correspond to me? Amid all creation, he alone has become the sorrow of my heart, the clashing note. And then how much could I tell you about my crafting in the sanctification of souls? Not only one Fiat, not my breath, do I place at their disposal, but my very life, my love, my wisdom. Yet how many rejections, how many defeats my love receives. Ah, my daughter, compassionate my hard sorrow, and come into my will to substitute for the love of the whole human family, so as to soothe my pierced heart. March 22nd, 1924, Volume 16. Necessity that Luisa write all that Jesus tells her about the divine will. In spite of the prodigies which God works in Luisa, the world has not changed. In the same way, also, the most holy Mamma, with nothing exterior, performed the greatest miracle. But then the time came when it was recognized as the fruit of redemption. The same will happen with the divine will, in order to put an end to the way of perdition of the world. Jesus gives Luisa the key in order to understand the established times. When I told the confessor what is written above, he said that he was not convinced, and that if this was true, this morning we should see the world changed, at least in part. So I remained doubtful and almost unwilling to write or say anything else. Then when my adorable Jesus came, I abandoned myself in his arms, and I poured out all my heart with him. I told him what the opinion of the confessor was, and that in order to believe, they would like to see prodigious things, miracles, and so forth. And my beloved Jesus, pressing me to himself as though wanting to cast away by his touch the doubts which were troubling me, told me, "My daughter, courage. Do not lose heart. If it were not necessary that you write, I would not have forced you to make this sacrifice. You must know that every effect, every good, every value I make you know about my will and all that the creature can do by living in it, are like many tastes, baits, magnets, nourishments, harmonies, fragrances, lights. Each effect I talk to you about contains its own distinct property. So by not manifesting all the goods contained in my will and where the soul can reach by living in my will, you would subtract a bait with which to capture them, or a taste to attract them, or a magnet to draw them, or a nourishment to satiate them. So the perfect harmony, the pleasure of the fragrances, the light in order to lead them would be lacking, and therefore not finding all possible goods, that is, not knowing them, they would not have that great yearning to rise above all other things in order to live in my will. And then do not worry about what you were told. Also my mamma contained my love as life, yet the world continued its course of evil. In nothing it appeared to be changed. Not even one external miracle was seen in her. Yet all that she did not do in the low world, she did in heaven with her Creator. With her continuous living in the divine will, she formed a place within her in which to draw the Word upon earth. She changed the destiny of mankind, and she performed the greatest miracle, which no one else has done or will ever do. To transport heaven upon earth was a unique miracle. One who has to do the greatest does not need to do the least. Yet who knew anything of what my mamma was doing, or of what she did with the Eternal One in order to obtain the great portent of the descent of the Word into the midst of creatures? It was known only by few at my conception that she was the cause of it, and by many when they saw me breathe my last on the cross. My daughter, the greater is the good I want to do to the soul, and this good must descend for the good of human generations and must bring me complete glory, the more I draw her to myself, and I make this good mature and seasoned between me and the soul. I segregate her from everyone. I make her ignored, and when my will wants her to approach a creature, it takes all my power in order for her to submit to the sacrifice. Therefore let your Jesus do, and calm down. And I, my Jesus, they are right. They say that they see no evidence, no positive good, that these are only words. And I don't really want anything. All I want is to do as you want, that I may do your most holy will, and that all which passes between me and you may remain in the secret of our hearts. And Jesus, my daughter, would you like it if I had worked my redemption in secret between my celestial Father and my dear mamma, who was to conceive me? And then, was no one else to know that I had descended upon earth? A good, as great as it may be, if it is not known, does not produce life. It does not multiply. It is not loved nor imitated. So my redemption would have been without effect for the creatures. My daughter, let them talk, and let me do. Do not be concerned, and do everything I did when I was upon earth, both interiorly and externally, which is not yet known, nor has it received its full and desired fruit, especially my hidden life. The creatures knew almost nothing of all the good I did, yet it served in an admirable and prodigious way before my divine Father, in order to prepare and mature the fruit of redemption. However, apparently I lived with the creatures, ignored, poor, miserable, and despised. But this meant nothing. Before my Father, I was who I was, and my interior works opened seas of light, of graces, of peace, and of forgiveness between heaven and earth. My interest was to open heaven for the good of the earth, heaven which had been closed for many centuries, and that my Father would look with love upon the creatures. Once this was done, the rest would come by itself. And so was this not a great good? Even more, it was the yeast, the preparation, the foundation of redemption. The same with you. It is necessary that I place the yeast of my will, that I form the preparation, that I lay the foundations, that highest accord be between you and me, between my interior acts and yours, in order to open heaven to new graces and new currents, and to dispose the Supreme Majesty to concede the greatest grace, that its will be known on earth, and it may live in the midst of creatures with its full dominion as it does in heaven. And while you occupy yourself with this, do you think that the earth receives no good? You are wrong. The generations are running on the vertiginous slope of evil. Who sustains them? Who prevents them from being submerged in their vertiginous race to extent of disappearing from the face of the earth? Remember that not too long ago the sea broke its boundaries under the earth, threatening to swallow entire cities, and your own town was in great danger. Who stopped that chastisement? Who stopped the waters and enclosed them in their boundaries? This is exactly the great chastisement which is being prepared for the ugly, reckless race of the creatures. Nature itself is tired of so many evils, and would want to take revenge for the sake of the rights of its Creator. All natural things would want to hurl themselves at man. The sea, the fire, the wind, the earth are about to come out of their boundaries to harm and strike the generations in order to decimate them. And does it seem trivial to you that while the human race is immersed in irreparable evils, I call you, and raising you between heaven and earth, and identifying you with my own acts, I make you run in my will, to prepare the act opposite to the so many evils that flood the earth, preparing good and trying to conquer man with my love, to stop him from his vertiginous race, giving him the greatest thing, which is the light of my will, so that by knowing it, he may take it as nourishment in order to restore his lost strengths, and so that strengthened by it, he may stop it with recklessness, and he may reacquire a firm step so as to no longer fall into evils. Then my Jesus disappeared, and I remained more embittered in thinking of the ugly, vertiginous race of creatures and of the turmoil which nature will cause against them. Then, as I went back to prayer, my Jesus returned in a pitiful state. He seemed restless. He moaned. He grieved. He lay down within me, turning now to the right, now to the left. I asked him, Jesus, my love, what is it? Oh, please, you suffer very much. Let us share these pains. Do not want to be alone. Do you not see how much you suffer and how you cannot take it any more? Now, as I was saying this, I found myself outside of myself, in the arms of a priest. However, although the person looked like a priest, the voice seemed that of Jesus. And he said to me, "We will go for a very long journey. Be attentive on what you see." And we walked without touching the earth. First I carried him in my arms, but since I was followed by a dog which almost wanted to bite me, I was afraid. So to free me from that fear, we changed position, and he carried me. Then I said to him, "Why did you not do it before?" I was so scared, but I did not say anything because I thought it was necessary that I carry you. Now I am content, for I am carried in your arms, so it won't be able to do anything to me. And I kept saying, Jesus is carrying me in his arms. And he repeated, I carry Jesus in my arms. But that dog kept following us during our whole journey. It grabbed one of my feet with his mouth, but it did not bite it. The journey was long, and I often asked, how much longer do we have left? and he 100 more miles. Then when I asked again, he said 30 more, and so forth until we arrived in the city. And now who can say what could be seen along the way? Somewhere, cities reduced to a heap of ruin. Somewhere, places which were flooded and cities submerged by waters. Somewhere, seas were overflowing. Somewhere else, rivers. And somewhere else, abysses of fires were opened. It seemed to me that all the elements were in agreement among themselves to harm the human generations, forming the graves in which to bury them. That which could be seen more along the way, and which was more frightening and horrifying, was the evils of creatures. Everything was darkness which came from them, but thick darkness, accompanied by a rotten and poisonous closeness. There was so much darkness that many times one could not even understand where he was. Everything seemed pretense and duplicity, and if there was any good at all, it was only superficial and apparent. But inside, the ugliest vices were smoldering, and they were plotting the most insidious snares to displease the Lord more that if they were openly doing evil. And this from all classes of people, like a woodworm which gnaws at all the root of good. In other places one could see revolutions, murdering of people by ambush, but who can say all that could be seen? So tired of watching so many evils, I often repeated, when are we going to finish this long journey? And the one who was carrying me, all pensive, answered, a little more. You have not seen everything yet. Finally, after much hardship, I found myself inside myself, in my bed. And my sweet Jesus, who continued to moan because he was suffering very much, stretching out his arms toward me, told me, my daughter, give me a little rest, for I cannot take it any more. And placing his head upon my breast, he seemed to be wanting to sleep, but his sleep was not peaceful. And I, not knowing what to do, remembered about his most holy will, in which there is full rest, and said to him, my love, I lay my intelligence in your will, in order to find your uncreated intelligence, so that by laying mine within yours, I may shade all created intelligences, that you may feel your shadow placed upon all created minds, and you may find rest for the sanctity of your intelligence. I lay my word in your fiat, in order to place the shadow of that omnipotent fiat between the human voices, so that your breath and your lips may be able to rest. I lay my works in yours, in order to place the shadow and the sanctity of your works between the works of the creatures, to give rest to your hands. I lay my little love in your will, to place you in the shade of your immense love, which I place between the hearts of all, to give rest to your fatigued heart. So as I kept saying this, my Jesus calmed down and fell asleep sweetly. Then after a while he woke up, but he was calm, and pressing me to himself told me, my daughter, I was able to rest, because you surrounded me with the shadow of my works, of my fiat, and of my love. This is the rest I spoke about after creating all things. And since man was the last to be created, I wanted to rest in him. That is by virtue of my will acting in him, which formed in him the shadow of mine. He was to let me find my rest in the fulfillment of my works. But this was denied to me, because he did not want to do my will. And until I find someone who wants to live of my will, which conceals my image in the soul, not finding my shadow, I cannot rest, because I cannot complete my works and give the last divine touch to all creation. This is why the earth needs to be purged and renewed, but with strong purges, such that many will lose their lives. And you, be patient and always follow my will. March 22nd, 1927, Volume 21. How one who lives in the divine will lives in the echo of the voice of Jesus. Effects of the rising of the sun of the divine will in the soul. Continuing in my usual state, I was following the divine will in the creation, and going from one created thing to another. I called my sweet life, dear Jesus, to come together with me to follow the acts of his will in all created things. But since he was not coming, I felt the nail of his privation piercing me through. And in my sorrow I said to him, "My Jesus, I don't know what to do in order to find you. I have you called by your justice in the sea, by your power in its roaring waves, and you do not listen to me. I have you called by your light in the sun, by the intensity of its heat that symbolizes your love, and you do not come. I have you called by your immensity, by all of your works in the vastness of the vault of the heavens, and it seems it is not for you. But tell me at least, what should I do to find you? If I do not find you in your own will, in the midst of your works, which are your expanses, where can I find my life?" But while I was pouring out my sorrow, he moved within me, saying to me, "How beautiful is my daughter! How beautiful it is to see your littleness as though lost within my will, searching for me in the midst of my works and not finding me." And I, "My Jesus, you make me die. Tell me, where do you hide?" And Jesus, "I hide within you. And besides, if you hear the voice of someone, by hearing his voice you can say that he is already near you. Now my will is the echo of my voice. If you are in it and go around through all the works of my fiat, you are already in the echo of my voice. And since you are in it, I am near you or inside of you, giving you with my breath the flight to go around up to where my voice reaches and up to where my fiat extends." Surprised, I said, "My love, so your voice becomes very, very long and very, very wide, because there is not one point in which your will is not present." And Jesus added, "Indeed, my daughter, there is no will, nor is there voice without the person who emits it. Just as my will is everywhere, so there is not one point that my voice does not reach, bringing my fiat to all things. Therefore, if you are in my will, in the midst of its works, you can be more than certain that your Jesus is with you." After this, I was thinking about the great good that the divine will brings to us. And while I was all immersed in it, my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, when the sun rises, it dispels the darkness and makes the light arise. It changes the humidity of the night, with which the plants have been invested, in a way that they lie there, oppressed, torpid, and melancholic. But as the sun rises, it turns that humidity into pearls, pearling everything, plants, flowers, and over all nature its silvery aura brings back gaiety and beauty, taking away the torpor of the night, and with the enchantment of its light, it seems to take all nature by the hand in order to vivify it, embellish it, and give it life. The sea, the rivers, the springs strike fear during nighttime, but as the sun rises, the sun's rays dispel the fear, and investing them down to the bottom, it forms in them a golden and silvery bed. It crystallizes the waters and forms in them the most beautiful enchantment. So all nature rises again by means of the sun. If it were not for the sun, it could be called a work without life. My will is more than sun. As it rises in the soul, it clothes her with light. All of her acts are pearled with divine light, in such a way that they convert into more than most refulgent diamonds and precious ornaments. Before the sun of my will rises, they are like night dew that oppresses the plants and gives them no tint of beauty. But with the rising of the sun, That dew forms the most beautiful ornament for all plants, and gives to each one of them its tint of beauty, and makes the variety and the vividness of their colors stand out. In the same way as my will arises, all the human acts become invested with light. They take their place of honor in my will. Each one of them receives its special tint of beauty and the vividness of the divine colors, in such a way that the soul becomes transfigured and enveloped with an indescribable beauty. As the sun of my will rises, it puts to flight all the evils of the soul. It takes away the torpor that passions have produced. Even more, before the light of the divine fiat, passions themselves lap up that light and aspire to convert into virtues, to pay homage to my eternal will. As it rises, everything is gaiety, and even the pains that, like seas at night time, strike fear in the poor creatures. If my will rises, it puts to flight the night of the human will, and taking every fear away, it forms its golden bed in those pains, and with its light it invests the bitter waters of the pains, and it crystallizes them into a sea of sweetness, in such a way as to form an enchanting and admirable horizon. What can my will not do? It can do everything, and it can give everything, and wherever it rises, it does things worthy of our creative hands. March 22nd, 1929, Volume 25. In his works, God makes use of human means. How in creation the divine will had the field of action, constituting itself life of everything. How the divinity acts only as concurrent and spectator. I feel my poor mind as though fixed in the divine volition, and I was thinking to myself, how can his kingdom ever come upon earth? And besides, how can it come if it is not known? But while I was thinking about this, my always lovable Jesus, coming out of my interior, told me, "My daughter, in my works I make use of human means, though I do the first part, the foundation and all the substance of my work that I want to do, and then I make use of creatures, so that my work may be known and have life in the midst of creatures. So I did in redemption. I made use of the apostles in order to make it known, to propagate it, and to receive and give the fruits of redemption. And if the apostles had not wanted to say anything of what I said and did in coming upon earth, and closed in their muteness, had taken not one step, nor made one sacrifice, nor laid down their lives in order to make known the great good of my coming upon earth, they would have caused my redemption to die upon its rising. And the generations would have remained without the gospel, the sacraments, and all the goods that my redemption did and will do. This was my purpose, as in the last years of my life down here I called the apostles around me, to make use of them as the proclaimers of what I had done and said. Oh, if the apostles had remained silent, they would have been responsible for the loss of so many souls, if they had not known the good of redemption, responsible for so much good not done by creatures. But because they did not remain silent, and they laid down their lives, they can be called, after me, authors and cause of so many souls being saved, and of all the goods that have been done in my church, forming as the first proclaimers her unshakable pillars. It is our usual way that first we do our first act in our works. We place everything that is needed, and then we entrust them to creatures, giving them sufficient graces so that they may continue what we have done, and therefore our works become known according to the interest and the good will that creatures have. So it will be with the kingdom of my divine will. I called you as a second mother of mine, and one, just as I did with her in the kingdom of redemption. I manifested to you the many secrets of my divine fiat, the great good of it, and how it wants to come to reign upon earth. I can say that I have done everything, and if I called my minister, so that you might open yourself in order to make it known, my intent was so that he would have interest in making known a good so great. And if this interest were not there on the part of those who should occupy themselves with it, they would put the kingdom of my will at risk of dying upon its rising, becoming themselves responsible for all the good that a kingdom so holy can bring. Or they would deserve that, putting them aside, I call others as proclaimers and propagators of the knowledges of my divine fiat. Until I find some who have interest and take to heart making known its knowledges more than if it were their own lives, the kingdom of my will can have neither its beginning nor its life upon earth. After this I continued my abandonment in the divine fiat, and my highest good Jesus added. My daughter, in creation it was my divine will that had its field of action, and although our divinity was concurrent, because we are inseparable from it, however, the prime act, the action, was all of our will. It spoke and it operated. It spoke and it ordered. We were the spectators of what our supreme volition was doing, with such great mastery, order, and harmony, that we felt worthily glorified and made twice as happy by our very will. Therefore, since creation is its work, the whole strength of creation and all the goods with which it was enriched are all in my supreme will. It is primary life of everything, and this is why it loves creation so much, because it feels its very life in all created things, and its very life flows in them. So much so that in creating man, wanting to make greater display of its power, of its love, and of its mastery, it wanted to enclose in him all the art of the whole creation. Not only this, but it wanted to surpass it, giving him such brush-strokes of divine art as to make him the little God, and laying itself inside and outside of him, to the right and to the left, above his head and under his feet. I carried him within my divine will as the outpouring of our love, and as the triumpher and admirer of its insuperable mastery. Therefore it was the right of my divine fiat that man live only and always of divine will. What had it not done for him? It called him from nothing. It formed him. It gave him his being, and it gave him double life, the life of man and that of my divine will, in order to carry him always clasped in its creative arms, so as to preserve him beautiful, fresh, happy, just as it had created him. So when man sinned, my fiat felt itself being snatched of that life that it carried in its very womb. What was not its sorrow? It remained with the void in its womb of the Son, for whom, with so much love, so as to keep him safe and happy, it had made room within its very life. And do you think that in redemption it was not my very divine will that incarnated itself in order to come to find the lost man? It was precisely it, because verbum means word, and our word is the fiat, that just as in creation it spoke and created, in the same way in redemption wanted and incarnated itself. It was its empty womb that claimed this child who, with so much cruelty, had torn himself away. And what did this will of mine not do in redemption? But it is not yet content with what I did. It wants to fill its womb. It no longer wants to see man disfigured by sin, by dissimilarity from it, but it wants to see him adorned by the insignia of creation, adorned with its beauty and sanctity, and taking his place once again inside its divine womb. The fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven is precisely this, that man return into my divine will, and only when it sees again its child happy, living in its house with the opulence of its goods, then will it calm itself. And so it will be able to say, "My child has come back. He is clothed with his royal garments. He wears the crown of king. He lives together with me, and I have given back to him the rights that I gave him in creating him." So the disorder in creation is ended because man has come back into my divine will. March 22nd, 1937, Volume 34. Need of love that the divine fiat feels for being loved in return. How to one who lives in it, it gives her so much love as to let her love in all hearts and in the whole creation, in order to be reciprocated for the love of everyone. How the soul without the fiat is like the earth without water. Evils of disturbance. My flight in the divine volition continues. It seems to me that it does nothing other than pour love over the creatures who, seeing themselves so intensely loved, not being able to contain this love so great, they feel the need to love he who loves them so much. One can say that the divine love is so much that it shakes, it moves in an irresistible way, as to make itself loved. The arrows of love that it sends in order to dart the creatures serve them in order to wound with those arrows he who had wounded them. Now, while I find myself under this abyss of love, my dear Jesus, my sweet life, surprising me, told me, "Daughter of my will, you must know that our love is so much that if unhappiness or anxiousness could enter our divine being, that which cannot be, it would render the divine being the most unhappy and restless being. Since we love with infinite and unceasing love, that can drown everything and every one with our love, so we feel the need of being loved in return. But alas, we wait in vain, and our love moans. It goes into delirium, and instead of stopping, it runs even more. But do you know where our love goes to unload itself, and to pause to rest a little in order to immediately take its flight, so as to pour out its continuous love? In the souls who live in my will. Because they are already drowned in my love, they feel my moans, my need of being loved in return, and they immediately reciprocate me in love. And as we feel the need of being loved in return, so they feel the necessity, the need of being loved by he who loves them so much. Now, my daughter, our volition circulates like blood in all the hearts of creatures. In the whole creation there is no point where it is not found. Its center is extendable to everything, and with its powerful and creating love, as within one single breath, it conserves and gives life to everything and every one, and it develops its life of love in everything. In fact, why does it create? Because it loves. Why does it conserve and circulate in everyone? Because it loves. Now we want to feel that one who lives in our volition loves us in all hearts. How beautiful is the note of love of the creature in every heart, that if these do not love us, she is who loves us. In the past and in the future, we want to feel that she loves us. In the sky, in the sun, in the wind, in the sea, in everything we want her note of love. More so because our will transports her everywhere. Living in it, the first gift that it makes her is love. But it gives so much as to be able to receive the reciprocation of love from everyone and everything. So much is the delirium of our love of our divine fiat, that it transports this note of love from the creature even into the empyrean, and it says to all the blessed, "Hear how beautiful is the note of love of the one who lives in my will on earth. and it makes this loving note resound in the saints, in the angels, in the Virgin, in the most holy Trinity, in a way that everyone feels double glory, and they celebrate the divine will operating in the creature, and together they celebrate the creature who has let it operate such that she is on the earth, and she becomes celebrated in heaven. My divine will would not tolerate that one who lives in it would not give it the exchange of love for everything and everyone. My divine fiat finds everything that it wants in the love of the creature. It finds her life as its. It finds the glory that is due it. It finds the appreciation, the esteem that is owed to it. It finds the true filial trust in order to be able to give her everything. In fact, love is generative, such that it generates all the divine goods. Therefore, my daughter, be attentive. You love and love in my will, and you will find so much love that you will be able to love everyone and love for everyone, he who loves you so much. After this, for the miserable circumstances of my life that it is not necessary to say on paper, better that they will be known in heaven, I felt myself oppressed, annoyed, and almost disturbed, without my usual peace and full abandonment in the divine fiat. And my sweet Jesus, surprising me, told me, "My daughter, what are you doing? Do you not know that the soul without the fullness of my will and the full abandonment in it is like the earth without water, like the plants without the sun, like the body without the soul? And the poor creature, like earth without water, that is not capable of producing a blade of grass, so she dies of thirst and is incapable of doing one little good. She burns with thirst, and there is no one who quenches it. And lacking the sun of my fiat, she will die in the darkness that will darken her eyes, and she will not see the good so as to know it in order to do it, and she will lack the heat in order to mature the same good. And then, without my will, she will feel herself without divine life. And as the body without the soul putrefies and therefore is buried, so without the life of my volition the passions putrefy her, and they bury her in sins. In addition to this, the oppressions, the disturbances, stop the flight in my will. She loses speed and cannot follow all its works any more. And so, if she has not followed all our works, I cannot bring her to take rest in the bosom of our divinity. Therefore, be attentive. Place the oppressions, the annoyances, what disturbs you, into the hands of your Jesus. And I will place them in the light and heat of my fiat, so that they remain burned. And you, feeling yourself free, you will more quickly follow the flight in my volition. Nor do I want you worried. I will think of everything. My daughter, stay in peace. Otherwise I will not be able to develop and grow the life of my will in you as I want. And this will be the greatest sorrow for me. And I will not feel myself free to breathe, to palpitate. I will feel hindered in continuing my life in you. March 22nd, 1938. Volume 35. As the creature decides to live in our will, all things change for her, and she is placed in the same divine conditions. The function of the children of the divine fiat, and how they will carry within them the life of their celestial Father. The last sign of love at the point of death. I continue my flight in the divine volition. Upon entering it, one can feel its balsamic air and its pacific waves. All is peace. Its strength is such that the soul feels invested by such a fortitude as to be able to do everything, reaching any extent, and even doing what God himself does. Divine will, how capable you are of changing the human will! Your power is such as to renew the poor creature, making her be born to new life. Then my adorable Jesus, returning for his short little visit, all tenderness told me, "My little daughter of my will, as the creature decides to live in my volition, all things change for her. Our divine dominion invests her, and we make her the dominator of everything, dominator of our strength, of our goodness, and of our sanctity, dominator of the light. Heavens and earth are hers by right. We place her in an atmosphere of security and imperturbable peace. Nothing of good, of health, of beauty, and of divine joys can be missing to this creature who lives in our will. All of her most tiny acts are filled with such contents as to capture the smile of all heaven and of our very supreme being. Therefore we are all attentive to see when she loves and when she works, to enjoy and smile together with her. Our love is such that we place her in our same conditions. We love even if we are not loved. We continue to give life if we are ignored, and maybe even offended. And if the creature comes back to us asking for forgiveness, we do not reproach her. Rather, we hug her and squeeze her to our divine lap. One can say that man can trust only us. Not only can he not trust other creatures, but he will find in them inconstancy and deception. And at the moment he believes he is able to rely on them, they will quit. Now man can trust only the creature who lives in our will. This creature will do as we do. Not being loved, she will love. Ignored or offended, she will run after the offender to save him. We feel ourselves within the one who lives in our will, and we love her so much that we do nothing other than pour rivers of love upon her, to be loved more and more, and with doubled and growing love. After this he added with more tender and touching love, "My daughter, the whole of creation was made in one outpouring of our most intense love. Therefore the children of our Fiat will serve the necessity of our love. Our love feels the need to pour itself out. Otherwise we feel suffocated within our flames. Here is why the children of our will are necessary. As a continuous outpouring of our love, we will put them in our same condition of feeling the need to pour out their love along with us. We will pour out love on each other. So just as creation started in an outpouring of love, in the same way we will close it with our children in an outpouring of love. These children of ours will serve to the complete glory of the entire creation. It wouldn't be a work worthy of us if we did not receive the glory that the creatures owe us for having created so many things for love of them. And then there is the highest, the most noble, holy and sublime point. We created everything so that all might be enclosed and animated by our will. Therefore, just as we delivered the creation, so it must return to us, into our adorable Fiat. If we didn't do so, it would seem as if we didn't have sufficient power to do all. Love, through which we can conquer all, or wisdom, with which we can dispose of all. The children of our Fiat will allow us to fulfill our will in them, and therefore they will be our glory, our triumph, and our victory. They will be our true children, who will not only carry our image, but the life of the celestial Father himself, dwelling within them as their own life. These children of ours will be our life, our heavens, and our suns. Oh, how we will delight in creating in them winds that blow love, and seas that murmur, I love you, I love you. We will find everything in them. There will no longer be a difference between heaven and earth. They will be one single thing for us, whether we keep them with us in heaven or with us on earth. Therefore cherish the thing that should concern you the most, to live in our divine will. Our love will find its rest, its release, and its peace in you, as well as the beginning of our happiness on earth inside the heart of the creature. Our will constantly be over you, to let our life grow within you. Our love will send you its continuous breeze, to love you always with new love, and to receive yours as expression and return of its love. After this my beloved Jesus added, but with such unspeakable tenderness that I felt my heart breaking, My good daughter, if everyone knew what I am telling you about all that my will does with the creature, and how it lives with her, they would all throw themselves into its arms, never to leave it again. You must know that my will is like a true mother for the creature. It creates her with its hands. It conceives her inside its maternal womb, and never leaves her alone, not even one instant, in this maternal womb, as if inside a sacrarium. It forms her, giving her the use of her members. It rears her with its breath. It gives her warmth, and once she has been well formed, it delivers her to daylight. But it never leaves her alone. More than a mother, it hovers always over her, watching over her, assisting her, giving her the motion, the articulation of her members, the breathing and the heartbeat. And as she grows, it gives her the use of the word, the step to her feet. There is nothing that the creature does that my will does not do together with her, to give her full use of the human life. Therefore the principle of the human life, of the soul as well as of the body, is formed entirely by my will, which remains in it as if inside its refuge, to give it perennial life. Now, my daughter, until the guilt starts in the creature, everything is my will. And as the guilt begins, so the tears and pains of this celestial mother begin. Oh, how it sadly misses its child. But it doesn't leave him. Its love binds it to live in that creature, to give her life. And although it feels its divine life as if suffocated, and maybe not even known or loved, the love of my will is so great that it follows her life, regardless of any offense, to make a surprise of love and save its child. Our goodness and our love are such that we use all the ways and all the means to pull him away from sin, to save him. And if we do not succeed during his life, we make the last surprise of love at the moment of his death. You must know that in that moment we give the last sign of love to the creature, providing her with our graces, love, and goodness, and placing so many tendernesses of love as to soften and win the hardest hearts. When the creature finds herself between life and death, between the time that is about to end and the eternity that is about to begin, almost in the act of leaving her body, I, your Jesus, make myself seen with an amiability that enraptures, with a sweetness that chains and sweetens the bitterness of life, especially in that extreme moment. Then, with my gaze, I look at her, but with so much love as to pull from her an act of contrition, one act of love, one adhesion to my will. In that moment of disillusion, in seeing, in touching with her hands how much we loved her and do love her, the creature feels so much pain that she repents for not having loved us. She recognizes our will as principle and completion of her life, and as satisfaction, she accepts her death to accomplish one act of our will. In fact, you must know that if the creature did not do even one act of the will of God, the doors of heaven would not be opened. She would not be recognized as heiress of the celestial fatherland, and the angels and the saints could not admit her into their midst, nor would she want to enter, being aware that it does not belong to her. Without our will there is no sanctity and no salvation. How many are saved by virtue of this sign of our love, with the exception of the most perverted and obstinate, although even following the long path of purgatory would be more convenient for them. The moment of death is our daily catch, the finding of the lost man. Then he added, "My daughter, the moment of death is the time of disillusion. In that point, all things present themselves one after the other to say, 'Goodbye, the earth is over for you. Now eternity begins for you.' It happens to the creature just as when she is locked inside a room and someone says to her, 'Behind this room there is another room, in which there is God, heaven, purgatory, hell, in sum, the eternity.' But she cannot see any of these things. She hears them being asserted by others, but those who say them cannot see them either. So they speak in a way that is almost not credible, not giving great importance to making all their words believed as reality, as something certain. So one day the walls fall down, and she can see with her own eyes what they had told her before. She sees her God and Father who loved her with great love, the gifts that he had given to her one by one, all the broken rights of love that she owed him. She sees how her life belonged to God, not to herself. Everything passes before her: eternity, paradise, purgatory, and hell, the earth running away, the pleasures turning their back on her. Everything disappears. The only thing that remains present to her is in that room with fallen walls, the eternity. What a change for the poor creature! My goodness is such, wanting everyone saved, that I allow the falling of these walls when the creatures find themselves between life and death, at the moment in which the soul exits the body to enter eternity, so that they may do at least one act of contrition and of love for me, recognizing my adorable will upon them. I can say that I give them 1 hour of truth in order to rescue them. Oh, if all knew my industries of love that I perform in the last moment of their life, so that they may not escape from my more than paternal hands. They would not wait for that moment, but they would love me all their life." End of March 22nd. Fiat.